When my son showed up after 18 months with a fake smile and coffee in hand, saying he just wanted to check on me and the Mustang, I knew something was off. He barely looked me in the eye, but he sure spent a long time in my garage. That night, I crawled under the car and found a GPS tracker tucked under the axle. I mailed it to Africa. The next morning, I woke up to 32 missed calls. And what happened after that? I never thought I'd say this about my own flesh and blood. My name's Frank. I'm 68, retired, and living alone in the same house I've had since '92. It's quiet out here, just enough to hear the wind scrape against the side of the garage and the creak of the front porch when the mailman steps up. Some folks say that kind of quiet gets lonely. Me? I find it honest. Peace doesn't knock. You have to make room for it. Now, I've got two sons. Michael, the older one, lives out of state with his wife and kids. Good man. Keeps to himself, but calls every Sunday. Then there's Darren, my youngest. Charismatic, sharp dresser, full of ambition. But somewhere along the way, ambition turned into arrogance. I don't know if it was the money, the people he surrounded himself with, or just something broken in the way he saw the world, but he stopped seeing value in anything he couldn't flash on Instagram. And right there lies the root of the issue between us, the car. Not just any car. A 1968 Mustang GT Fastback, midnight blue, white racing stripes, V8 engine that still growls like the day she was born. My father bought it new when he came back from Vietnam. Said it reminded him that he made it home. He handed me the keys on my 30th birthday with one line. "This ain't just steel and oil, son. This is family." And I believed him. I've spent the last 3 decades keeping that Mustang in pristine shape. Not for show. Not for bragging rights. For respect. That car outlasted my marriage, both of my parents, and most of my friendships. It's the one constant that's never betrayed me. Darren, of course, saw it differently. About 2 years ago, he asked, no, demanded the car. Said it was his birthright. He'd already priced out how much he could flip it for, talking about auction houses and collector markets like he was doing me a favor. I told him flat out, "It'll be yours when I see the heart in the right place." Not before. He called me stubborn, then didn't speak to me for over a year and a half. Not a text on Father's Day. Not a card at Christmas. Silence. Until last week. It was just after 7:30 in the morning. I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I heard a knock. Sharp and fast like someone in a hurry. I opened the door, and there he was. Darren, standing on my porch like it hadn't been 18 months. Holding a Starbucks cup in each hand and flashing a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Thought I'd check in on you, old man," he said, handing me a coffee like peace offerings grew on trees. I took it, hesitated. "That's so." He stepped in without asking, looked around like he expected something to be different. "Yeah, just been thinking. You know. Wanted to see how you were holding up. And the Mustang. Still got her." There it was. 5 minutes in, and he was already circling back to the car. "Still in the garage," I said, watching his eyes. "Where she belongs." He nodded. "Too quick. Mind if I take a look?" I shrugged. "Go ahead." He didn't wait for me. Just walked through the hallway and out the back door into the garage like it was his. I stood in the kitchen, sipping the coffee, listening to the sound of the garage door open and close again. My fingers tightened around the cup. Something was wrong. When he came back in, he barely said another word. Chatted about the weather, muttered something about work being crazy, and then said he had to run. It was all under 10 minutes. No real questions about me. No warmth. Just a drive-by dressed up as concern. After he left, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just been cased like a house in a heist movie. And it wasn't paranoia, it was instinct. You don't spend your life fixing engines and listening for the faintest tick without learning to recognize when something's off. So that night, after dinner, I went out to the garage with a flashlight and a crowbar, just in case. I got down on my knees beside the car and started inspecting every inch. And sure enough, tucked under the rear bumper, barely visible unless you were looking for it, was a black magnetic box. GPS tracker. Small, discreet. The kind you can order online with express shipping and bad intentions. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Like my body knew this betrayal needed to be understood fully before it could be felt. I sat there on the cold concrete floor, the tracker in my hand, staring at my father's car. My car. And I didn't feel anger. Not yet. I felt disbelief. Then sadness. That my own son, my flesh and blood, couldn't even look me in the eye. But he sure looked long enough at the damn axle to slap a tracker on it. I didn't know what he was planning. Maybe to follow me. Maybe to see if I moved the car. Or worse, to time a robbery for when I wasn't home. Whatever it was, I wasn't going to wait around to find out. The next morning, I boxed up the tracker, wrote a fake return address, and shipped it to an address I pulled off a random travel blog from Ghana. Let Darren think the car was halfway across the world. Let him feel what it's like to be played. And that's when things started to unravel. Because by sunrise the next day, I had 32 missed calls. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't hit all at once. It creeps in, like a slow leak in a tire. You don't notice you're drifting off course until the steering starts pulling. That's how I felt standing in the garage that night, looking at the Mustang after I'd mailed the tracker overseas. I should have been angry, maybe even yelling, breaking something. But instead, I just stood there in the dark, feeling like something sacred had been touched without permission. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept going back over the visit. The way Darren showed up out of the blue, unannounced. How he didn't even really look at me. Not in that way where a son sizes up his old man and checks if he's holding up okay. No, his eyes flicked past me, like I was the screensaver and the main show was already loaded. He asked how I was doing, but his tone was off. Mechanical. Practiced. Like a guy reading from a script that he didn't write himself. And then, the moment I said the car was in the garage, it was like he lit up inside. Not joy, something else. Greed? Strategy? I don't know what word fits exactly, but I know that look. It's the same one I used to see when a customer walked into the shop and asked for a quick fix when they really wanted to get away with cheap parts. He spent 5, maybe 6 minutes in the garage. I stayed in the kitchen on purpose, wanted to see how long he'd be alone with it. When he came back in, he was different, lighter, as if he'd done what he came to do. That coffee? He barely touched his own. Set it down and left it sweating on the counter. It wasn't a visit. It was a recon mission. So after I mailed the tracker, I sat with the silence in my house and waited. I didn't have to wait long. By the time I'd made eggs the next morning, the phone lit up like a Christmas tree. 32 missed calls, all from Darren, and a few voicemails. I hesitated before playing them. A part of me still clung to the idea that maybe I was wrong. Maybe there was some logical explanation. But logic doesn't call you 32 times before 9 a.m. The first voicemail was quiet at first. Dad, hey, call me back when you get this. Just needed to check on something. The second one was shorter, more urgent. Dad, seriously, where are you? And then the third, panic. I don't know what happened. Just call me back, okay? Please. It was all I needed to hear. At first, I thought maybe he realized the tracker was gone and figured out I found it. Maybe he was worried I'd confront him. But the tone in his voice, that wasn't guilt. That was fear. Not fear of me, but of something spiraling beyond his control. Around noon, my neighbor Carl knocked on the door. Carl's a good guy, retired truck driver, built like an oak tree, sleeps during the day, works part-time nights at the freight yard. He looked concerned when I opened the door, like he was holding something in. Hey Frank, he said, scratching the back of his neck. Everything okay around here last night? I blinked. Why? I got home around 3:30 a.m. As I pulled in, I saw 2 guys near your garage. Hoodies. One had a crowbar. They were trying to stay out of the streetlights. I was about to call the cops, but they ran off when they saw my headlights. My stomach dropped. Did you get a look at their faces? Carl shook his head. Nah, was too dark. But they looked young, real twitchy. I thanked him, closed the door, and locked it. Then I sat down at the kitchen table and stared out the window at the garage. That's when it hit me. Darren didn't just want to watch the car. He was planning to take it, or have someone else take it for him. The tracker wasn't about me. It was about timing. He was trying to figure out when I was out of the house or asleep. And when the GPS pinged from Ghana, they must have thought I'd shipped the car overseas. They panicked, thought someone beat them to the punch. It was almost poetic, really. His own scam tricked him. But the terrifying part wasn't the betrayal. It was how close it came to working. If Carl hadn't pulled in when he did, if I hadn't found that tracker in time, I might have walked out to a busted garage door and an empty space where the Mustang used to be. I couldn't tell if Darren had sent those guys himself, or if he'd hired someone and lost control of the situation. Either way, it meant one thing. He wasn't my son in that moment. He was a thief. And worse, he was a thief who thought he deserved it. That night, I changed the locks on the garage, installed new cameras, put the Mustang up on blocks, and disabled the ignition, just in case. It wasn't just about protecting the car anymore. It was about protecting the piece of my life that still felt untouchable. But deep down, a part of me still wanted to know why. Not just the how or the when. I wanted to hear it from Darren's mouth, to look him in the eye and ask how the hell we got here. And soon, I'd get that chance. Because the next time he showed up, he wasn't coming with coffee. He was coming with rage. The rest of that day moved like molasses, thick and uneasy. I kept looking out the window, not because I expected to see anything, but because my instincts told me to stay alert. The silence wasn't peaceful anymore. It was the kind of silence that came before a storm. The Mustang sat in the garage like a sleeping lion, too valuable, too still. I stood there that evening, hand resting on the hood, and whispered out loud like a prayer. They won't get you. Not while I'm breathing. But my hands trembled. Because the truth was, this wasn't just about the car anymore. Darren had crossed a line. He didn't just try to manipulate me. He tried to violate the legacy passed down from my father. That meant something. It had to mean something. I poured myself a drink. Nothing heavy, just enough to take the edge off. And sat in my worn-out recliner with my phone in hand. I stared at the missed calls list again. 32. All in one morning. I played the last voicemail once more, and it hit me differently this time. Darren wasn't just panicking. He sounded blindsided. Which told me one thing. He hadn't planned for things to go wrong. That scared me more than if he had. Because if he didn't know what he was doing, that meant someone else did. Maybe he wasn't alone in this. Maybe he got caught up with the wrong crowd. And if that was the case, what else was he into? And how far would they go if they didn't get what they came for? That night, I didn't sleep at all. I sat in the living room with the lights off and a baseball bat across my lap. Every creak in the house made me flinch. Every sound outside, wind, leaves, some cat knocking over a trash can, put my nerves on edge. I wasn't afraid of Darren. I was afraid of who he might have brought into this. The next morning, I decided I wasn't going to just sit and wait for the next move. I needed to look Darren in the eye, but I wasn't going to call him. No, that would be too easy. He'd twist the truth, spin some story about how it was all a misunderstanding. He was good with words, always had been. But the tracker, the visit, the 3 a.m. prowlers? That wasn't talk. That was action. And actions don't lie. So I waited until around noon, when I knew he'd be awake. I knew from his old habits that he wasn't a morning person unless there was money involved. I walked out to the garage and rechecked every corner. Locks secured. Cameras rolling. Car untouched. Then I took a drive, just far enough to let the new security system kick in, but close enough to turn back fast if needed. When I pulled into a diner parking lot off the highway, I sat in my truck, pulled out my phone, and dialed his number. He picked up on the first ring. "Dad," he said, breathless, too eager. "Thank God. Are you okay? I've been calling you nonstop." I said nothing. "Listen," he rushed on. "Something weird happened. Look, I think someone took the car." I finally spoke, calmly. "Why would someone take it?" A pause. "I don't know. When I checked the tracker it showed. Africa? It doesn't make sense. You didn't ship it, did you?" He said it so casually, so stupidly. That's when I knew. He wasn't just involved. He'd orchestrated the whole thing. He paused again, realizing too late what he'd just confessed. I leaned back in my seat and stared at the sky through the windshield. "You sure do know a lot about that tracker for someone who just came by to say hello." Dead silence on the other end. Then, softly, "Dad, I can explain." "No need," I said. I already did the math. 2 guys outside my garage at 3 a.m. A tracker under the car the same day you randomly show up after 18 months. Then the tracker's gone, and suddenly I'm getting calls like you lost your wallet. I exhaled slowly. "You didn't come to check on me, Darren. You came to steal from me." "I wasn't going to steal it," he snapped. "I was just keeping track of it. In case something happened to you." I was looking out. For the car. Not me. The line went quiet again. Then he said, "You don't get it. That car was supposed to be mine. You're holding on to it like some dusty museum piece. You don't even drive it. What's the point of keeping it locked away?" I clenched my jaw. Because it's not just a car. It's the one thing in my life that still reminds me of who I was. Of who your grandfather was. You wouldn't understand, because you've never respected anything long enough to feel what it means to earn it. His voice turned bitter. "So I'm just some ungrateful kid now, huh?" I let the words sit. Then, "No, Darren. You're a man who tried to rob his own father. And you failed." I ended the call without another word. I sat there in the truck, phone buzzing again in my hand. More calls coming in, but I didn't answer. I let them pile up, just like before. The lies, the anger, the excuses. I'd heard enough of them for one lifetime. This wasn't over. I knew that. Because people like Darren don't take losing well. But next time he showed up, it wouldn't be in the driveway with coffee and a smile. It'd be a confrontation I was more than ready for. It's a strange kind of grief when you realize your own child sees you as an obstacle. Not a parent, not a guide, but a gatekeeper standing between him and something he wants. That's what Darren had become. And once I heard his voice crack on the phone, when he realized I knew, the grief turned into something else, steel. I went home that day with a kind of focus I hadn't felt in years. You know the feeling, the way your hands move with certainty when something finally clicks into place. That was me, locked in. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had to protect what was his from someone who used to call him dad. First thing I did was finish disabling the Mustang. Removed the distributor cap. Tucked it away in the attic where not even a skilled thief would think to look. I knew Darren wasn't coming for the car himself. Not anymore. But I wasn't about to underestimate him again. If he'd hired someone once, he could do it again. Or worse, come back himself with a chip on his shoulder and something to prove. That same night, I pulled up the security footage from the garage. I'd installed a cheap little system about 6 years back after a break-in down the street. Nothing fancy, just enough to give me a second pair of eyes. When I looked at the timeline, there was a glitch, a brief static buzz, right around 2:58 a.m. But even with the interference, I caught a few frames. 2 figures. One slightly taller. One hunched, carrying something in their hand. Looked like a crowbar. They circled the garage door, tried the handle, then froze when the neighbor's headlights hit them. Within seconds, they bolted. Gone. I watched it 5 times. That was all I needed. They weren't just checking the place. They were ready to break in. And that's when something dark settled in my chest. Darren hadn't just betrayed me emotionally, he'd made me a mark. Like I was some clueless old man who didn't know how to protect what he loved. He didn't even have the spine to do it himself. He outsourced it. Like I was just another job on a checklist. He didn't know who he was messing with. The next morning, I drove to the local body shop I used to work at, just to say hi to the guys, nothing serious. While I was there, I picked up a set of dummy plates, just in case I ever needed to throw someone off. Then I called an old friend, Javier, who ran a custom garage out by the industrial district. Javier owed me a few favors from way back when I helped him out with a messy inspection case. "Frank," he said when he picked up, "You still alive, old man?" "Alive and sharper than ever," I said. "Listen, I got a favor to cash in. I need you to do a full cosmetic swap on a vehicle. Just temporary. Vinyl wrap. Change the look, nothing under the hood. Something that'll confuse anybody looking for a midnight blue Mustang." Javier didn't ask questions. That's why I trusted him. "Bring her in tonight." That evening, under the cover of dusk, I drove the Mustang to Javier's shop. He and his team spent 4 hours working like artists. When they were done, the car looked completely different. Matte gray, no stripes, blackout rims. Not a showstopper anymore. Just another muscle car in a city full of them. When I drove it back home, it felt like I was bringing back a ghost. Darren's eyes would never recognize it. The trap had been flipped. But I didn't tell anyone. Not even Carl. I wanted Darren to believe the car was still exactly where he thought it was, until he made his next move. I needed him to feel confident. Sloppy. The following week, I stayed quiet. Ignored every call, every vague text. "Hey, can we talk? I just want to explain. This is all a misunderstanding." But then, he showed up again. I was out watering the lawn when I saw a black sedan pull up across the street. Darren stepped out, dressed sharp, like always. But his face was tight, eyes darting around like he was expecting a fight. Or worse, expecting to find nothing. He walked up to the edge of the driveway, didn't even say hello. Just blurted, "Why'd you send the tracker to Africa?" That was it. No pretense. No faking concern. The act was over. I set the hose down and stared him dead in the face. "So you admit it now?" His mouth opened, then shut. He looked at the ground. "I didn't mean it like that." "Then how did you mean it?" I asked. "Was the tracker an accident? Did it fall into your pocket and attach itself to the axle?" He shifted, hands on his hips. "You don't get it. I needed to know what was happening with the car. If you were going to sell it, ship it, I had a right to know." "A right?" I laughed once, sharp, dry. "You've got a lot of opinions for someone who went 18 months without a single call. But suddenly you show up with coffee and a GPS tracker? That's not concern. That's plotting." He stepped closer. "I just want what's mine, Dad. I didn't move. It's not yours. It's never been yours. And after this stunt, it never will be." His face twisted. The charm was gone. "You're just being petty. You don't even drive it anymore. What's the point of holding on to something you don't use?" "The point," I said slowly, "is that it's not about use. It's about meaning. That car means something you've never understood. Because you've never earned anything you didn't scam your way into." That hit. I saw it in his jaw, how it clenched. But he didn't argue. He just stared at me, trying to figure out how the con went sideways. "You think you're clever," he said finally. "Sending that tracker overseas, changing the car's look. You think you won." "No," I said. "I think I protected what matters. From someone who doesn't." He didn't say goodbye. Just turned and walked back to his car, slammed the door, and sped off. I stood there a long time, watching the road even after he was gone. I wasn't proud of what happened, but I was proud of how I handled it. Because this wasn't about a car anymore. It was about standing between a legacy and the person willing to destroy it to satisfy his ego. When you spend your whole life building something, piece by piece, bolt by bolt, you know the exact sound it makes when it starts to fall apart. That's what it felt like as I stood in the driveway watching Darren speed off. The dust hadn't even settled on the pavement, and already the air felt poisoned. There was no going back now. The lie had cracked open, and what spilled out wasn't just betrayal. It was entitlement. But I knew my son, knew how he thought. He wasn't done. Darren never accepted a clean loss. He'd come back, and next time, he wouldn't be asking. And I was right. 3 days later, just after 6 in the evening, sun still hanging low, casting long shadows, he came back. This time, he didn't park across the street. He drove straight into the driveway like he still had rights here. Got out of the car, slammed the door harder than he needed to, and started walking toward me without hesitation. I was sitting on the porch, reading. I didn't flinch. I just closed the book and waited. "You humiliated me," he said, voice low but sharp. I kept my tone even. "No. You did that yourself." His eyes flared. "I told people the car was mine. I had buyers lined up. Do you know how stupid I looked when they couldn't find it? When I couldn't track it? When I had to back out with nothing?" I felt it like a slap, but not because I was hurt. Because he was saying the quiet part out loud now. He was trying to sell it. Not keep it. Not cherish it. Just profit. "You lied to people about owning something you didn't earn," I said. "Then you tried to steal it. You should be glad I didn't call the cops." "You wouldn't," he said, half daring me. "Don't test that." He stepped closer, arms crossed. "You think this makes you some noble hero? All you've done is prove how spiteful you are. You're holding on to that car like it's the last piece of power you have over me." I stood up slowly. "No, Darren. I'm holding on to it because it's the last piece of integrity this family has. And you tried to sell it like a stolen watch." He actually laughed, cold, mocking. "You really think anyone cares about that old junker the way you do? Times have changed, Dad. Nostalgia doesn't pay bills." I stepped off the porch, closed the distance between us. Not threatening, just so he'd hear me without a single distraction. "That car carried your grandfather home from war. He bled on that seat. He built a life here, piece by piece, with calloused hands and a stubborn heart. He handed it to me because he saw something in me. And I've kept it alive all these years not because I had to, but because I wanted to. Because it meant something." His expression didn't change. "Stone," I went on. "And I prayed, Darren. I prayed that one day I'd see that same spark in you, that same respect. But you looked at it and saw dollar signs. He said nothing. I was ready to give it to you one day, I added. Hell, I had the title paperwork ready in my drawer. But not anymore. You've burned that bridge. His jaw clenched. So what, you're cutting me off? Over a car? No, I said, breathing in deep. I'm cutting you off because you broke the last bit of trust one had in you. You didn't just cross a line. Darren, you tried to sneak across it in the middle of the night, with people who would have trashed my home if they'd had the chance. His nostrils flared, and for a second, I could see it, that flicker of shame. But he buried it quick. Too proud. I needed the money, he said. It came out quiet. Smaller. And you couldn't come to me and say that? I asked. You thought I'd say no, so you decided to take instead of ask? He didn't answer. So yeah, I continued. The answer's no. To everything. You don't get the car. You don't get help. And you sure as hell don't get to stand in this driveway and pretend you're the victim. Something in his chest broke. I saw it happen in real time. His shoulders dropped just slightly. His eyes glossed over, but he blinked it away. He turned to leave, stopped halfway to the car, and said, You'll die alone, Dad. And no one's gonna care what's in your garage when you do. I didn't move. I'd rather die alone with my principles than live surrounded by liars. He didn't say another word, just got in his car and drove off. No dust storm, no speeding tires, just quiet exit. I stayed in the driveway a long time after that, long enough for the sun to dip down and the stars to peek out. I didn't feel victorious. This wasn't a win, but it was necessary. And sometimes, that's all you can hope for. I didn't open the garage for a week. Not because I was afraid Darren would come back. No, he was done. The look on his face when he pulled away said everything I needed to know. He'd been beaten at his own game. And more importantly, I saw that bitter flicker of realization. He never even understood what he was trying to steal. But still, I couldn't bring myself to look at the Mustang. Not right away. It wasn't the car's fault, of course. It was just chrome and steel, rubber and leather. But it had become the battleground. The symbol of everything Darren and I couldn't speak aloud. Our distance. Our disappointments. His entitlement. My expectations. All of it compressed into the silent frame of that 1968 fastback like a pressure cooker ready to blow. On the seventh day, I walked into the garage and just stood there. She was still beautiful. Still perfect. Matte gray now. A skin I'd chosen to keep. For safety, but also for symbolism. The old shine didn't suit this new chapter. She wasn't for showing off anymore. She was for keeping. Quiet. Powerful. Undeniably mine. I ran a hand along the hood and sat down beside her on the old stool I'd had for decades. The same one I'd used back when I taught Darren how to change his first tire. He was 11 then, still full of curiosity. He asked questions, listened closely, laughed when the jack slipped, and I smacked my knuckles on the fender. That version of him felt like a ghost now. I reached into the glove box and pulled out the envelope I'd been working on. Inside was a handwritten letter, folded neatly. On the outside, I'd written one thing. If you ever become the man I hoped you'd be. I placed it back inside, closed the box, locked the car. No, I wasn't leaving it to him. Not anymore. But I wasn't erasing him either. That note would stay. Because people change, sure. Sometimes. Not often. But if he ever did, if he ever truly understood, not just the value, but the weight of legacy, then maybe he'd find it one day. That letter would be there, waiting. But until then, this car wasn't going anywhere. Neither was I. I called Michael later that night. My older boy, the one who never asked for anything. We talked for nearly an hour. About his kids, about his garden, about the engine problems he was having with his old pickup. He didn't mention Darren. Didn't need to. But before we hung up, he said something that caught me off guard. You know, he said, if you ever decide to pass on the Mustang, don't give it to me because I'm the oldest. Give it to the one who earns it. I felt something tighten in my chest. Not sadness. Not pride. Just recognition. Good night, son, I said. And thank you. After the call, I went out back and lit a small fire in the pit. Sat under the stars with my coffee and let the silence return. This time, not heavy. Just clean. The world felt right again. Not fixed, but right. Darren might have tried to rob me of a car, but the real theft he attempted was something far deeper. He tried to rewrite the meaning of a legacy into something cheap, transactional, empty. But some legacies, they can't be stolen. They can only be earned. And mine. It was staying right here, under my roof, behind that locked garage door, in the hands of the only man who truly understood what it cost to keep something sacred. Me. Some betrayals cut deeper than theft. They strike at the heart of what we value most. Frank's story shows how standing firm, even against family, can protect not just your belongings, but your identity. Have you ever had to draw a line with someone close? Share your story in the comments, and let's talk about what it really means to protect a legacy.